More than half of Miami once heated their water with the sun, not solar panels in the photovoltaic sense, not anything that required a permit, a specialist, or a loan. A box, a pane of glass, copper pipe, painted black and coiled like something you'd find in a shed. And then around 1920, the gas company arrived with a better price, and 60,000 solar water heaters across Florida quietly became a story nobody told their grandchildren. This is not a story about suppressed technology. It's a story about something that works, that got shelved because something cheaper came along, and what happens when that cheaper thing stops being cheap. Water heating is not a small line on the energy bill. The U.S. Department of Energy puts it between 14 and 18% of a typical American household's total energy expenditure, second only to heating and cooling the air itself. For the average American homeowner, that is somewhere between $200 and $400 a year, every year, for as long as they own the house. Not a crisis number, a slow bleed number, the kind of cost that never quite gets addressed because it never quite gets bad enough to force a decision. And a significant portion of it, in the right climate, with the right setup, can be offset with materials from any hardware store for $20 to $50, depending on where you live. In 1909, William Bailey, not a plumber, not an engineer, a commercial entrepreneur from Monrovia, California, bent a length of half-inch copper pipe into a shape that would go on to heat the water in more than 4,000 homes. His collector was not complicated. Copper pipes soldered to a black painted metal backing, enclosed in a glass-covered box, pulling heat from the sky the way a dark rock holds warmth long afternoon. No electricity, no gas line, no moving parts. He called the company Day and Night Solar Heater Company. And between 1909 and 1918, he sold more than 4,000 units across Southern California. By 1941, more than 60,000 solar water heaters were running in Florida. And at one point, more than half the population of Miami heated their domestic water with the sun. One system installed in Phoenix in 1917 was found decades later, switched back on, and returned to full service in 1980. 63 years of sitting idle in the desert heat, and it still worked. Around 1920, a thermostatically controlled gas water heater hit the California market. Cheaper up front, always hot, no waiting on the weather. Within a decade, Bailey's company was gone, not because the copper panel failed, but because the economics changed and the market followed. The physics of copper does not renegotiate with market conditions. The price of gas does. And each time gas got cheap enough, an entire generation grew up without ever learning the other option existed. Bailey's customers knew how to build a solar collector the way their fathers knew how to fix a carburetor, not as a philosophy, just as a practical thing a person could do. That knowledge did not get improved upon or replaced. It got priced out, and then it got forgotten. Here is what copper does that almost nothing else can. Grab a cast iron skillet and a plastic spatula, put them both on a hot stove, and touch each one a second later. That gap is conductivity. Copper's thermal conductivity is 401 watts per meter. Kelvin compared to steel at around 50, and PEX plastic, the tubing now running through the walls of most American homes, at 0.19. Copper moves heat roughly 2,000 times faster than the material your plumber probably used last time he was in your house. That is why copper has been the default in heat exchangers, radiators, and industrial cooling systems for over a century. Not preference, physics. When you paint copper tubing flat black and lay it on a dark surface inside a glass-covered box, you create what engineers call a flat-plate solar collector. The glass admits sunlight and slows the escape of infrared heat, a thermal trap working on the same principle that makes a car interior hit 140 degrees on a cold, sunny afternoon. The black surface converts that radiation to heat, and the copper moves it into the water almost before you can measure the delay. Three things doing exactly what their physics demands. The glass traps, the black surface absorbs, the copper conducts. No part of this is new science. What is new is that it costs $50 or less to build at home. A 2023 study in the International Journal of Heat and Technology found that a copper coil collector achieved a 25% gain in thermal efficiency over standard flat plate designs at lower flow rates. A passive system, no pump, no electricity, no controls of any kind, was documented in 2024 producing outlet water temperatures of 87.3 degrees Celsius, hot enough to pasteurize water and hot enough for any shower you have taken in your life. Driven by nothing except gravity, copper, and the sun, no utility, no bill, no infrastructure beyond the roof it sits on. This is a supplement, not a full replacement, and anyone who tells you otherwise is doing the technology a disservice. In winter in northern states, with a single small panel, your existing heater will still run. This is an honest claim, not a limitation to hide. There are parts of the country where this saves you $40 a year, and parts where it saves $400, and that gap is real, and it matters. What the evidence shows, from India's Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, from peer-reviewed studies across multiple climates, is that a properly built system in a sun-rich region can reduce water heating costs by 70 to 80% annually. In the American South, the Southwest, the Sun Belt, that is not a rounding error. That is most of the bill. The bill does not require a contractor, a permit, or a weekend course. 20 feet of copper tubing, available at any hardware store and bendable by hand. A plywood base, 2 feet by 2 feet, painted black with heat-resistant paint, and a pane of glass or acrylic fixed a few centimeters above the copper, not touching it because that air gap slows convective heat loss significantly. The panel faces south, which in the northern hemisphere is where the sun spends its time. The outlet connects to the cold water inlet of your existing water heater. Water enters the panel cold, heats up through the copper, and arrives at the heater already warm, sometimes hot enough that the thermostat never trips. You're not replacing the water heater. You are giving it a running start every morning for free for as long as the sun rises. That is the honest version of the claim. Not a miracle, not a revolution, just a reduction in how hard a machine works every single day. And over a year, that reduction compounds into real money. In good sun, the heater may not fire at all. That is not a marketing claim. That is documented physics operating on plywood and copper in someone's backyard. Materials, $20 to $50. A commercially installed equivalent, $500 to $3,000. And the underlying physics is identical. What Bailey understood, and what a small group of builders quietly rediscovers every generation, is that heat does not come from a utility company. It comes from the sun, and copper moves it into water better than nearly any material found in a century of looking. The infrastructure for that transaction is a box, a sheet of glass, and a coil of pipe. Bailey proved it in 1909, and a system installed in Phoenix that same era proved it again in 1980. More than 60 years later, no one from a utility company came to switch it back on, and the man who found it just opened the valve. A system built in 1917, found in 1980, switched on, still pulling heat from the same sky. Most people will never hear about William Bailey. If that gap between what works and what gets used, mixtino, is a question you want to keep asking, Survive Better is where those questions live. The sun rose this morning over copper pipe somewhere, and the copper did what it has always done.